Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, after doing hundreds of routes over the past year, I finally have Zygarde complete form. And today, I'm going to be showcasing it in Ultra League for the first and probably last time, just to showcase how broken of a Pokemon this is, especially when paired with Shadow Feraligatr, and why personally, I want to see it nerfed. Zygarde Complete is a Pokemon that entirely relies on its massive bulk. This is a Pokemon that does not encourage skillful play whatsoever, and in my view, the Ultra and Master League metas would be a lot healthier with it not being around. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's take a look at the easiest 100 elo I've ever gained in the Ultra League. Hopping into the first match, picking up a bad lead Zygarde into Weezing, but I safe switch into Shadow Feraligatr. Hydro Cannon is going to connect, dealing massive damage, and the opponent does build up to a potential Play Rough. Play Rough not going to come through as they bait with a Brutal Swing. In comes Greninja, and considering I have Shadow Typhlosion in the back, this is great to see this here. I did intentionally run Shadow Typhlosion with this team because Zygarde is an incredibly boring Pokemon, and I wanted to have something fun on the team. I'm going to switch out here. My switch timer is up thanks to the 50-second switch timer. I can bring back in Zygarde, and look at Greninja, man. Greninja, one of the hardest hitting Pokemon, and Zygarde just tanks Hydro after Hydro after Hydro. Their switch clock will be up soon. I need to get damage on this Greninja so I can potentially incinerate it down later. So I'm going to go for a Cacti here with the Crunch. They can bring out the Weezing. That's very okay by me. They need to Play Rough to KO here. A Brutal Swing will not KO. They Brutal Swing. Zygarde still does not faint. This Pokemon is just ridiculous. I'm going to bring in Typhlosion, tank the Brutal Swing, and just fully incinerate down. And now I have Typhlosion up 40 energy, up a shield as well, and this opponent is in a very tough spot. Thunder Punch is going to get the shield. Opponent is going to fire off their Night Slash, but I can commit the shield. Exit with energy, and my opponent is in dire straits. It's Drapion in the back. Drapion not going to appreciate a Shadow Blast Burn from Typhlosion. One more Incinerate. We get a nice little combo play with the Crunch from the Zygarde. And thanks to Zygarde just taking a billion hits from that Greninja, we take the win. Hopping into the next match, leading Zygarde into Shadow Feraligatr. Feraligatr does have coverage for this matchup. Ice Beam would hit for massive double super effective damage. I will respect it with a shield, as Ice Beam is not a move I want to take. Feraligatr is going to full send. Most Zygarde players will just click Crunch. I'm actually going to go for an Earthquake here, because as a Feraligatr player, you're probably likely to try and call the Crunch. Earthquake is going to land, and down goes Gator. In comes Weezing. I just pivot out into my Feraligatr, and now I get to launch a Hydro Cannon at this Weezing. And Hydro Cannon's going to do a ton of damage. The Hydro Cannon connects. I can now farm this down with Typhlosion later in the match. Opponent is going to full send the Play Rough. That does quite a bit of damage. In the back is Drapion. Drapion going to take a lot of damage from a Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon will get shielded up, as the opponent is going to take full advantage of the fact that they do have a shield advantage. It would have been very close if they can get that farm down or not. They decide to fire off energy, and now I just bring in Zygarde to do what Zygarde does best, just absorb hit after hit. They get the Crunch. They get the Crunch debuff as well. Surely with the Crunch debuff, this next Crunch will KO. Surely. It has to. It doesn't. What a ridiculous Pokemon. I'm now going to fire off the Crunch. Crunch into the Weezing is just going to set up a really nice farm down for Typhlosion. Brutal Swing is not something I have to worry about, and I'm just up too much energy, where unfortunately for my opponent, there's just no way to win this game now. I can just go straight Thunder Punch in this moment, as the Incinerates will eventually put it into Thunder Punch range. I'm at another Thunder Punch, so I can very safely shield, and then just under-tap the Thunder Punch, even if they have a move. My Typhlosion is going to win charge attack priority by an absolute mile. So I fire off Thunder Punch KOs Drapion, and we're able to take the win. Hopping into the next match, and it appears I've been core broken on the lead as I lead Zygarde into Virizion. Virizion is a complete wall to my charge attacks on Zygarde and crushes Feraligatr. So surely I'm in a bad matchup here. You would think. However, Zygarde wins the 0s and the 1s versus Virizion, despite the fact that its charge attacks are resisted. This Pokemon is truly ridiculous. I would very happily see a Dragon Tail nerf if it meant we didn't have to see Zygarde anymore. They can give stuff like Guzzlord other fast moves, but my goodness, this Pokemon is just the worst. In comes Drapion. I still survive to make an Earthquake. Earthquake is going to be shielded, and now I just bring in Shadow for Alligator. And my opponent had to commit a bunch of shields to try and get through the Zygarde, and now I pretty much have a guaranteed sweep with Shadow Typhlosion in the back. I will launch a Hydro Cannon at this Drapion. Drapion is going to no-shield. Drapion could have overfarmed quite a bit more there, so that's a misplay by my opponent, and I can take full advantage of that misplay. They actually end up going for an Aqua Tail as well. They're going to catch the Hydro back onto Virizion, but at this point, 2-shield Typhlosion is about to fully sweep. I can switch in the Typhlosion, snipe with an Incinerate, opponent unable to get that damage off. In comes the Drapion, but I'm just farming down. It doesn't really matter what they have in the back. Even if it's something like Giratina, 2 Blast Burns are still going to do way too much damage. In the back, they have a Skuntank, and unfortunately, this game is over. Blast Burn from Shadow Typhlosion will not land, as the opponent will resign the match. Hopping to the next match, leading Zygarde complete into Cobalion, and I will save switch out of this matchup. That's a fine matchup for Zygarde, but I do need to check and see what they have in the back, and my opponent is going to bring out Greninja. Very good Pokemon for me to bait out. Greninja is going to launch the Night Slash. They do not get the boost, and Shadow for Alligator can actually win the zeros here. So this is a pretty nice spot for me to be in. They're going to throw right away, trying to pick up the knockout with the Night Slash, but Night Slash does not KO here. So I'm able to withstand the damage, go for the Hydro, and my hope is that they'll shield so I can just farm down with Zygarde and be able to Earthquake the Cobalion, but instead, my opponent does actually end up giving up Switch. So the fact that they gave up Switch means they're going to have another good check for Zygarde in the back. I bring in Typhlosion, but I know that I'm going to have to protect this Typhlosion quite a bit. I will go for the Blast Burn. Thunder Punch wouldn't KO in case they try and call the bait. Opponent does not try and call the bait, so whatever they have in back is not a big fan of energy from Typhlosion. So I will commit the shield. I've gotten the Sacred Sword baited twice. This should be short of a Stone Edge. It should only be the Sacred Sword. Sacred Sword not going to cut it in the back. It's Mandibuzz, and this game is over because Typhlosion is guaranteed to land a move. They shield the Thunder Punch. That means I get to a Shadow Blast Burn. This just does way too much damage. Mandibuzz is a wall to energy from Zygarde, but that Zygarde has too much health remaining, and the opponent will concede the match. We see a familiar lead in the next match, Zygarde versus a Shadow for Alligator. For Alligator going to stay in this matchup and launch the Ice Beam. Ice Beam, of course, very, very threatening in this matchup. Ice Beam is shielded up. Opponent going to switch out into Licky Licky, and this is another meta matchup where Zygarde just dominates. This is one situation where Miltank would actually be better because Miltank, of course, is Ice Beam. Miltank's niche is that it can actually beat both Feraligatr and Zygarde, whereas Licky Licky falls short in taking down Zygarde. I could go for an Earthquake and a farm down, but realistically, I think I want energy on this Zygarde, and these Body Slams are just doing nothing. The rollouts are doing nothing either. So I think my play is going to be to go for a crunch and a farm down. If so, I should have thrown the crunch sooner in case it got a debuff, but I didn't want to rely on a debuff here, so I will go for the crunch. This will allow them to make one final slam, but it still doesn't KO. How many charge moves has Zygarde taken in this game already? This Pokemon is so unserious. In comes Clefable. I bank the energy in case I need it for later, bring in Feraligatr. They end up going for a Swift. Swift is fine. That's not going to do a lot of damage. And now they're going to bring in their own Feraligatr, and that's all I had to do, was aggressively switch my Gator, wait for them to send in theirs, and the game is instantly over. My Feraligatr actually wins Charge Attack priority as well. Do have a little bit of attack on that Gator, and winning Charge Attack priority, yeah, this game is done for. I believe my Switch Clock should be up here shortly, so instead of letting myself get farmed down, I aggressively farm down with the Typhlosion. In comes Clefable. But yeah, there's just no winning this game for my opponent here, as I'm going to be able to build up to the back-to-back Blast Burns and no one-move KOs. So I can no-shield and then just launch the back-to-back Blast Burns. Opponent's correct play is to no-shield and basically just try and call a bait. They end up shielding, but I have two. So in that situation as the opponent, the only way you win is if I bait for no reason. So the opponent should always no-shield there, but regardless, it won't matter. We take the win. We move to the next match. Zygarde into Aurorus. Okay, that's a terrible lead. Save switch for Alligator. Out comes a Shadow Dragonite. Thank goodness, I might finally be getting hard countered. This is the first team I think I've ran where when I lost, which was not very common, I was actually pretty happy about it because I was like, thank goodness, this terrible toxic Zygarde is actually taking an L. Here, I was hoping against hope that I was going to be able to make 3 Hydros. I don't end up being able to get there. I do get both shields, but as we see, I fall just short of that 3rd Hydro. I'm going to bring in the Zygarde and look for complete farm. I know, of course, that I do have access to Earthquake, and Earthquake will inflict quite a lot of damage onto Aurorus, but I'll take too much damage to get there, so I switch out into Typhlosion in the back. It's Giratina, and this is proof. This team can actually get hard countered. It's unfortunately very difficult to hard counter it, but it is possible. Look at that Shadow Blast Burn, by the way. Typhlosion is crazy. Here, I thought about letting this go and trying to farm with Zygarde, but I knew an Earthquake wouldn't KO Aurorus, so I kind of just have to hope that Typhlosion is going to be able to sweep. That for some reason, they overfarmed too much, they let me get a Blast Burn, and a Blast Burn plus a Crunch knocks out, but my opponent's not going to let me do that. So the good news is the Zygarde team finally takes a loss, but it basically took getting Mon for Mon countered to do so, so definitely not an encouraging sign by any means. Bit of a tricky lead in the next match, Zygarde versus Drifblim. Drifblim, of course, has Icy Wind, which would hit for double super effective damage, so I'm going to save switch into Shadow for Alligator. Out comes Licky Licky, very happy to bait this out. Body Slam is a pretty poor move now, so for Alligator is going to be able to take Body Slams for days. I make the back-to-back Hydros. Opponent can no-shield both, but they will have to throw all their energy, and this is going to set up a nice Zygarde farm. I can tank whatever they throw here, it does not matter. Opponent is going to fire off a Shadow Ball that is the better damage per energy move. Opponent overfarms too much, they let me get the Hydro, and they play to a CMP tie that they do not win. The fact that the opponent ended up going for a second Shadow Ball here does make me think that they might be on double nuke, which I can't really blame them for, considering how bad Body Slam is now. I'm going to leave pretty close to a Crunch. Crunch, of course, will hit for super effective damage onto the balloon. Opponent sends back in the Drifblim, and I will fire off the Crunch and then look to sweep with the Shadow Typhlosion. Crunch is going to connect. In comes Shadow Typhlosion in the back. Opponent running some serious spice. There is Belly Bolt. Belly Bolt did get access to Parabolic Charge, which got a massive rework this season, and it also has access to Zap Cannon. But the issue is, of course, Zap Cannon now debuffs at a far reduced rate. Parabolic Charge does not get the boost for the opponent, so a bit unlucky for them, but even if they got the boost, I'm still just looking to overfarm. They go for the Parabolic Charge. This time they will get the boost, but Typhlosion just has way too much energy. There is no way to stop Typhlosion at this particular moment. I bank the Thunder Punch, switch out into the Zygarde, and the opponent concedes the match. Picking up a positive lead in the next match, Zygarde versus Guzzlord. I do win the zeros by landing an Earthquake. However, I'm expecting my opponent is going to want to try and protect the Guzzlord, so I'm going to go for a Crunch bait. I'm really weak in the back to Guzzlord, so even a no-shielded Crunch is fine because it potentially puts it into Incinerate downrange later. The Crunch bait is shielded, and now my opponent is going to be firing off of the Dragon Claw, but I can shield back, and I can Dragon Tail them into Crunch range and win the ones. They're throwing entirely super effective moves. I'm throwing resisted charge moves, and I win the ones. This Pokemon is so unbalanced. And I feel that my words carry a lot more weight now when I say this as someone who has grinded the cells, nerf Zygarde. There's no reason it should be at this power level. I'm going to look to farm up quite a bit of energy and then pick up the knockout with a Hydro Cannon. Hydro Cannon is going to be shielded up by the Nidoqueen. Opponent switches out into Trevenant. Yeah, this game's over. This game is over. I can bank a ton of energy, bring in Typhlosion, Incinerate all the way down. Nidoqueen is going to get KO'd due to a barrage of charge attacks, and the opponent does not want any of that, and they will resign the match. Hopping into the final match, Zygarde versus Galar Weezing. I'm going to save switch into Shadow for Alligator. Opponent goes for the Brutal Swing. This denies my full sneak, but a Brutal Swing is not going to do a lot of damage to a Feraligatr. They send out Tentacruel. Tentacruel, not an amazing spot for my Feraligatr to be in. If I had Crunch, this matchup would be fine, but I think Crunch is just a mistake on Feraligatr. Ice Beam is really needed to be able to hit back against stuff like Guzzlord and, of course, Zygarde. I let myself get as low as possible, maximizing the Shadow Claws, hoping this Hydro can force a shield or win swap, but it does neither. Tentacruel could have Blizzard. I'm just going to let it go. They go for a Blizzard. That's a double super effective Blizzard, and Zygarde survived. In the back, I'm actually fully RPS'd as its Guzzlord, so I do lose the match, but how on earth does Zygarde live that? Hopping into the final match, hitting Zygarde into a bad Pokemon, Shadow Hariyama. And anytime your opponent is running just like an objectively bad Mon against a Zygarde, you're probably just instantly going to win the game. There, I think the opponent waited a turn to try and avoid a catch, but they accidentally wait too long, and I end up getting a Dragon Tail for free. I try and crunch the debuffed Hariyama. They make a switch out into Drapion. Drapion can pick up a knockout here with the crunch onto the Zygarde. Crunch still doesn't KO. Okay, yeah. This Pokemon, get it out of here. We're done. There is no need for Zygarde. There's no need for Zygarde. Please nerf this immediately. Season 21, I don't want to see Zygardes anymore. This Pokemon is just OP. They land the crunch. Aqua Tail, I don't think actually knocks out here. It'll be very close. They will go for the Aqua Tail. It does not KO. Feraligatr makes the Hydro. They're going to fully sacrifice the Hariyama here as I fire off the Hydro. Hydro picks up the knockout. Back in comes Drapion, but I can just sweep with Typhlosion. Again, it's really not going to matter what they have in the back because I can trade my shield advantage for 60 energy. And a Typhlosion up 60 energy is basically unbeatable. In the back, it's another Dark Poison. So they're running double Dark Poison, but unfortunately they're running a very, very bad fighter on the lead. Blastbird connects. Goodbye, Skuntank. And that is honestly not a good game. It's a bad game. Please nerf Zygarde. All in all, I think the combination of Zygarde plus Shadow Feraligatr honestly feels broken at the moment because due to the Poliwrath nerf, no one is running it. And that combination is just completely free into the Ultra League meta currently. Once people start running Poliwrath again in Ultra, which is pacing is garbage, but purely off of its really good stats and the fact that it still has Icy Wind, I think it'll pick up in play eventually to help counter this core. But currently, Zygarde Feraligatr is just extremely free. And having Typhlosion as something that can do damage and sweep in the back. As I mentioned, this is probably the easiest 100 elo I've ever had in the Ultra League over the course of 2 sets. Because my goodness, even if you have bad alignment, Zygarde just tanks hit after hit after hit, gets a shield advantage, and then Typhlosion is just sweeping everything. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.